Honey,
Yeah?
I think we need to get a new backpacking stove.
Is this a problem that you face? You're wanting great gear to take your youth group out or your family on a backpacking trip, but you're just limited to what you can buy out there with the money that you have. Well, there is a solution. It's this little guy right here. Look at how small and simple that is. This is an alcohol stove. Runs on denatured alcohol, available at any hardware store. Here are some comparative advantages. Most of us are familiar with canister style stoves. These stoves are very light. They've made them very light, but the problem isn't in the stove necessarily, it's in the fuel. Once this fuel gets low, it loses pressure, which renders the stove not quite as efficient as when the fuel bottle was full. Also, if I come back from a trip and I still have a lot of fuel left in my bottle, what do I do with it? I either take a almost empty fuel container on the trip with me and have to use the rest of it, but then I have to have a backup again. Also, these have to be destroyed after they're all used up. They can't be refilled again, which is putting a lot of waste into the landfills. A lot of us are familiar with the old pressurized style of stove, which works extremely well at high altitude and burns very, very hot. These stoves are also very heavy and there's a lot of moving parts involved, which when you're working with kids in the outdoors, not always the best idea. Setup is complex and there's a possibility of very large fire when you're working with white gas or Coleman fuel or super fuel, depending on the name brand. An alcohol stove is so simple. There's no moving parts. This one here is made out of a Red Bull can, believe it or not. So essentially it's free. Just steal your buddy's Red Bull can after he's done drinking it. If you click the links that are on this page, you'll find a lot of resources on building alcohol stoves. Guys have been making these for years and years and years for ultralight backpacking. This stove right here weighs 1/2 ounce and is virtually indestructible with no moving parts. All you have to be able to do is fill it with alcohol and light it. Let me show you. Lighting an alcohol stove is as simple as pouring the fuel in and giving it a light. Because alcohol is a non-volatile fuel, when you light it up, you don't have to worry about an explosion happening and burning your skin, which is great for kids. Also, if you listen, you don't hear anything. That's right. Sitting around the camp stove cooking a meal is no longer a yelling contest, but as an enjoyment. Now you'll see the flickering going on. This is the stove actually priming itself and turning into a legitimate heat source. As you can see, the flame grows as it sucks in more oxygen and heats itself up. I love it. And it smells so much better. One of the issues with an alcohol stove is the distance from the flame source to the bottom of your pot. I built this little stand out of some fencing material. It was pretty easy and made a little holding base out of aluminum on the bottom that holds the stove. Now you can see when the pot goes on, it really gets optimal flame on the bottom of the pot to spread the heat as evenly as possible. So I'm not putting the flame right in the center of the pot and it expands to the whole base. That's really important. But on an ultralight trip, you don't necessarily need this really nice base. You can use rocks to build up around the stove to get the optimal height off the flame. One of the negatives of using a alcohol stove is the fuel itself. Because alcohol is not a real volatile fuel, it tends to not want to light in the morning when it's really cold outside. I'll often carry a very small container of alcohol. This is enough for 2 to 3 people for about 2 days right here. This is real easy for me to sleep with at night and to keep warm. That way when I put it into the cup and I light it up in the morning, it actually lights. There's no on and off switch. So you really have to learn what is the right amount of alcohol to pour into the cup before you light it, depending on the volume of water that you're wanting to heat. Don't work real well with high winds. I would definitely recommend building yourself some kind of a windscreen, thin-walled metal, really thin metal or aluminum at just about any hardware store. My total cost in building this whole entire system, windshield, windscreen, the stand, and the stove, is right about $3. It's a big, big difference. There are some tools necessary, but that's been one of the neatest parts of building alcohol stoves, is working with my young men and young women that love the outdoors and actually sitting down with them and building stoves, their own stove that they'll have for the rest of their life with them, with my tools. So they get to come to my house and cut out and build their very own alcohol stove that they then get to use on all the ultralight backpacking trips that we go on. It's pretty rewarding, and it's a wonderful relationship building time with almost no cost. My name is Dane Tornell, the Executive Director of Umpqua Valley Youth for Christ in Roseburg, Oregon. I've been using outdoors as a ministry tool now for 16 years, and I absolutely love it. Please feel free to click on the links to learn how to build your own alcohol stove, and also please feel free to contact any one of us on the YFC Outside team. We'd love to help you learn how to use the outdoors as an effective and inexpensive ministry tool in your area.